Call to order and roll call.
Okay, Commission Chair Frederickson,
Here.
Vice Chair Shores,
Here. Commissioner
Goss,
Here.
Commissioner Hunsaker,
Here.
Commissioner Keith is excused, Commissioner McCoy,
Here.
Commissioner Shores, oh, I already got you. We've got a quorum.
Forgot me.
Got you. Commissioner DeVries.
Here.
Got out of order. You're supposed to be first.
Scott,
We have
would
a
you
quorum.
lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please, tonight?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, approval of minutes, the regular meeting minutes of January 9th, 2017.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second it.
Got a motion and approved? Good.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, call to public, comment from the public. Those wishing to address the commission should fill out the request forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. Anybody? All right, Richard?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. This is a report on past council action. The text amendment Z018-001, that was a text amendment regarding the calculation of legal protest areas as amended by Arizona's revised statutes. That was approved by the council, as well as the C2 change to clarify that single-family dwellings are not permitted by right in C2 and C3. That was also approved by the council. I can answer any questions you have. All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Richard. Before we move on to Sydney, I'd like to welcome Gary L. Kellogg, our interim economic development director, to our planning and zoning meeting here tonight.
Pleasure, Chairman. So, working with the department heads and stuff right now down there, and I think we're going to create a nice atmosphere for folks coming into planning and zoning, professional counters and stuff. So we're starting at the ground level and working that, and this is my second week, so I'm getting my feet on the ground. Thank you. Anything I can do?
Welcome.
Welcome aboard. Last meeting, there was some confusion, and I just want to clarify it, that the chairman cannot make a motion. I'll be asking for motions sometimes, and I think there's a little bit of confusion. And I was new at it too, so just so everybody's on board and we all follow along there. And so I'd like to turn it over to Sydney for our open meeting law presentation.
All right, good evening. All right, thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, I think I've met most of you, but my name is Sydney Muley. I'm the city clerk. I understand a couple of you could probably give this training by now, but I also see a lot of new faces, so it's always a good refresher. We do provide this training once a year to all of our commissions, and that's required by state statute. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please interrupt me and feel free to ask. So, open meeting law. State statute says that it is the public policy of the state that any meetings of public bodies will be conducted openly and that notices and agendas be provided and contain information as is reasonably necessary to inform the public on matters to be discussed or decided. To this end, any person or entity charged with interpretation of this law shall construe any provision of it in favor of open and public meetings. And all meetings of any public body shall be public meetings, and any persons desiring to attend shall be permitted to attend and listen to the deliberations and proceedings. This means that the public's business must be conducted in public. So why does this matter? It protects the public and preserves the right to participate in government, and it protects public officials and maintains the integrity of government, ensuring a better informed citizenry and building trust between the government and its citizenry. So who must comply with it? You do. Public body is defined as the legislature, all boards and commissions of the state, or any political subdivision, and all standing, special, or advisory committees or subcommittees of or appointed by a public body. So if you guys were to create a subcommittee to address a specific issue, you still have to follow open meeting law, you still have to post an agenda, and you still have to keep minutes. This also includes our quasi-judicial bodies, such as the Board of Adjustments and Building Board of Appeals. And a subcommittee is defined as any entity, however designated, that is officially established on motion or order of a public body, and whose members have been appointed for a specific purpose to make a recommendation to that public body on a course of action to be taken or considered by the public body. And a meeting is defined as the gathering in person or through technological devices of a quorum of the members of a public body at which they discuss, propose, or take legal action, including deliberations by a quorum with respect to any such action. And a quorum is simply a majority of the members. So as a seven-member commission, which all of our boards and commissions are except one, your quorum is going to be 4, and vacant positions do not reduce this. So if for whatever reason you have 3 vacancies, your quorum number does not reduce. A meeting can be held through technological devices, which include emails, websites, blogs, tweets, Facebook, telephone and video conferences, text messages, or any other similar technology. So if Sandy sends an email out to all of you saying here's information for all of you, and you guys start having a conversation by email saying this is what I think, you've just created a meeting, so please never reply all. You can also create a meeting by splintering the quorum, and this occurs when less than a quorum discusses a matter, but then those members discuss with other members, creating a quorum through a serial discussion. And no meeting can take place with less than 24 hours advance notice to the general public and to each member of the public body. This is just some brief information on what an agenda must include. Has to have a notice of the date, time, and location of a meeting, specific matters to be discussed, considered, or decided, and again, information as is reasonably necessary to inform the public. So, you can't just put zoning question. You have to specifically list what that zoning question is going to be. And you may discuss other matters that are reasonably related to the item listed on the agenda. And your staff liaisons are going to be very good about helping make sure you don't get too far off topic. But you can't be talking about, a zoning issue, over on the east bench and then say, well, but what about this zoning issue downtown? Those aren't related issues. Only items listed on the agenda or items related directly to it can be discussed, considered, or decided. If it's not on the agenda, it cannot be discussed. If a matter not listed on the agenda is brought up during a meeting, the best practice is to defer that item to a later agenda, so ask staff to place that on the next agenda. If an action is taken on an item not properly noticed on the agenda, then that particular action violates open meeting law and is null and void. And a call to the public is an agenda item that allows the public to address matters in the public body's jurisdiction, even though that item is not specifically listed on the agenda. These are not required by state statute, and you may impose a reasonable time limit on the speakers. With call to the public, you have a couple of options. You can respond to criticism after call to close of the public. So if somebody wants to come up and criticize a recommendation that you guys made after everybody's done speaking on call to the public, then somebody may respond. You can ask staff to review an item. You can ask that that item be placed on a future agenda so that it can be discussed, or you can say silence. You certainly don't have to say anything. And again, these are only permitted if they are listed on the agenda. So if you have to call a special meeting for whatever reason to discuss a particular topic, and there's no call to the public listed on that agenda, there's no call to the public. The public has a right to attend, listen, tape record, and videotape your meetings. They do not have the right to speak or disrupt. And sanctions for violation of open meeting law include civil penalties of up to $500, plus attorney's fees and court injunctions against the public body or the public official. So on this, I like to use splintering the quorum as an example. So that would be $500 for each person who participated in that serial discussion and $500 per item that was discussed. So you can see where that would get really bad really quick. And any public officer who intentionally violates the law, the court may remove that officer from office and assess them personally with attorney's fees. And again, any action taken in violation of the open meeting law is null and void. And these sanctions can also be enforced against any member of the public body or anyone who knowingly aids, agrees to aid, or attempts to aid anyone in violating the open meeting law. So again, with a serial discussion, you can't say, hey, you know so-and-so, can you let them know this is what I'm thinking for the meeting on Tuesday? That doesn't excuse you from the open meeting law, it just brings them into the violation. And we do like to touch briefly on conflict of interest. Every once in a while it will arise with this commission. It is illegal to fail to declare a conflict of interest under Arizona state law, or to participate or otherwise be involved in any discussion that involves issues or contracts where a conflict exists. This covers all public officers and employees of incorporated cities and towns, and also applies to their relatives as well. In general, a conflict of interest is going to occur when someone is involved in a substantial ownership or salaried employment with a private corporation doing business with the city. So I think most typically what would come up for you guys is if you are involved with a contracting firm and they have a zoning issue coming to you or whatever, matter of preliminary plat, whatever it may be, you would have to excuse yourself from the discussion. You can't participate at all. And a public officer or employee may sell equipment, materials, supplies, or services to the municipality only after a public competitive. And remote interests are ones that are so minor that they do not constitute illegal conflicts of interest. And if you have a remote interest, you can participate in the discussion and vote on the item. A lot of times with this, I'll get questions of, well, I know the person. We're in a small town, we kind of know each other. So that's not, it's, you know, if this is your spouse, your brother, your sister, your parent, that's when you're going to have a conflict. And if you have any questions on open meeting law or conflict of interest, please feel free to contact us or the city attorney's office. So any questions on open meeting law? Okay. And the city council has asked that we add a piece to this, so I will get through this as quickly as I can. I know you guys have a busy evening. But they did ask us to talk on parliamentary procedures with all of our boards and commissions. They felt not all of our boards and commissions really had this down, and with so many getting new chairs and vice chairs, they felt that this was a really good year to do it. So parliamentary procedure is just a set of rules for conducting a meeting. It allows everyone to be heard and make decisions without any confusion. And it's important because it's a time-tested method to conduct business at meetings and public gatherings. It can be adapted to fit the needs of most organizations, and it is important that everybody knows just a few basic rules. This presentation is based on Robert's Rules of Order. I'm sure that's the most common parliamentary procedure that you guys hear. But it's not exactly fit for public meetings, so we adapt it as best we can to suit our needs. This is a typical meeting order. I understand that some of our boards and commissions follow this a little different than what we usually do. But generally, this is going to be the meeting order that you see for all of our business meetings. A motion is simply a proposal that's put to the entire membership for them to take action on. There's a few different types of motions, but the most common one that you guys are going to use is going to be a basic motion, and it's simply, I move that we approve, deny, whatever the case may be. every once in a while, you guys may see subsidiary motions and incidentals, but I don't believe we see that very often with our boards and commissions. So the life of a motion is basically just a motion, second, there's debate on the motion, and then you take a vote. Motions are presented by obtaining the floor, so wait for your chairperson to recognize you. You make your motion in a clear, concise manner. State that I move that we, rather than I move that we don't, or you make sure that your motion is very clear so that everybody understands what you're looking to do. And then you wait for someone to second. As soon as someone seconds the motion, the chairman restates the motion, and then it's opened up for discussion. Once the motion has been presented, it becomes assembly property. So it becomes the property of the entire commission, and you guys can change it without necessarily having to go back to that original motion maker. It's the entire commission's ability to do that. You can always expand the motion if you feel that it needs a little something extra added to it. So again, if there's a zoning case where you guys feel there needs to be additional conditions added, you guys can always do that during the debate. And then the chairperson asks if you're ready for a vote. There's no more discussion, the vote is taken. You can vote by voice, which is most typically what we see even with the city council. You can ask for a roll call vote, or voting by division is something typically done at the state legislature, but you can do it here. The order needs to be broken up. You can also make a motion to table an item, so if you feel it needs further research by staff, you guys need more time to think it over, you guys can always make a motion to table an item, or you can make a motion to postpone indefinitely. So if it's something, zoning code change that you guys are looking at and you really feel it's been hammered to death, it's not going anywhere, you guys can make a motion to table it indefinitely, item's done. This is the best way to get things done at your meetings, but it only works if it's used properly. So only allow motions that are in order. Have members obtain the floor properly, so wait for your chairperson to recognize you. Speak clearly and concisely and obey the rules of the debate. And most importantly, always be courteous. And you can always look online for additional resources. Any questions on that? Thank you guys so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Sydney. That'd be another one. Alrighty. Old business. Discussion on allowable fencing or screening materials within the Kingman zoning ordinance. The commission will discuss allowable screening materials on fencing where there is permitted outdoor storage as allowed in section 26.810 of the Kingman zoning ordinance. The commission may initiate a text amendment to make certain changes to this ordinance.
Good evening.
How you doing, Sylvia?
Hi.
Very good. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Sylvia Schaefer, and I didn't see you last meeting, so welcome, because I wasn't here. I work in planning. I'm a planner, and I work with Rich and my new director over there for now. Okay, so screening materials. I tried to become a screening material expert this last round. There's so many, so I'll do my best with this. Okay, so we were requested to present a discussion item related to allowed screening materials for outside storage. Specifically, there is a concern over the use of landscaping fabric as a screening material on fencing where there is permitted outside storage, kind of like in this picture here. Landscaping material is allowed to be used as screening of outside storage in the C3 commercial service business and light industry and heavy industry zoning districts. In C3, outside storage areas must be an accessory use to a permitted use, while in light industry and heavy industry, we allow outside storage as a permitted use. The result is that you can have a standalone storage yard in the industrial districts, but not in C3. So for the example in the picture, this is actually a C3, and the outside storage is tied to the business, such as tire repair. So the allowable screening materials we have right now is chain link fencing with metal slats, masonry walls, stucco fences, redwood cedar board fencing, painted corrugated metal, vinyl PVC products made specifically for fencing, and vinyl coated polyester with a minimum opacity rating of 75%, and in parentheses, landscaping fabric. And I did take the time to find some examples of all the materials we allow. They don't have, do I have a pointer here? Oh. I think you can see, but we have the, oh, I know, it's the chain link fence, here it is, chain link with metal slats, masonry wall, stucco fence, and the redwood fence. And then we have, I found corrugated metal, but not necessarily painted. And then this is vinyl PVC for fencing. And this is also vinyl PVC for fencing, but more like the fence look. And then this is landscaping material here. Not acceptable screening materials as of right now is doors of any kind. So this kind of got fun for me. Cable spool ends, plywood or masonite, old appliances, corrugated fiberglass, plants used alone, stacked railroad ties, bamboo, and pickets. And so I had a little fun finding some pictures of things we don't allow now, which would be the door fencing, old appliances, cable spool ends, corrugated fiberglass, plant screening, stacked railroad ties, bamboo, and picket with single slats. I did conduct some research related to what other local jurisdictions like Bullhead, Lake Havasu City, and Mojave County allow for screening materials. And I found that they don't really allow the landscaping material, and the most common materials were wood, brick, masonry, and stone. And then I also researched the description of vinyl-coated polyester with a minimum opacity rating of 75% in the landscaping fabric. And really, landscaping material is made from a woven polypropylene fabric that is not vinyl-coated polyester. And also, landscaping material is typically used for weed prevention and not screening. So I did put an example of landscaping material versus the polyester. And really, the polyester is much thicker, like they use for tennis courts, kind of really thick, and landscape material, so it's not really the same. So I think the mistake was putting landscaping material in the parentheses next to that description. So for today, I wanted to provide you information as to what screening materials are allowed in the commercial and light industrial zoning districts for outside storage. Staff recommends removing landscaping material from section 26.810 of the zoning ordinance. For the subject business that currently has the landscaping material used as screening, we won't be able to make him take it down, but we could go talk to him and highly recommend more preferable screening material to be used. So for commission action, you can ask me to bring back more research before initiating a public hearing, or take no further action at this time, or make a motion for staff to draft a text amendment to section 26.810 of the zoning ordinance to remove landscaping fabric or anything else you'd like me to adjust it to. And if you have any questions.
Any questions?
I have one. Did you say something about corrugated metal had to be painted
It does say painted, yes.
as opposed to rusted or
Yeah,
some other?
I actually had trouble finding a painted corrugated metal, but this is the closest I can find up on the screen as far as corrugated metal, so.
I guess my question is specifically why painted and not?
Actually, this ordinance was definitely made before my time. I'm not sure what we were going for at the time. Do you know, Rich? Because you've been here a little longer than me.
I don't specifically remember that, other than it probably was something that someone had proposed to the
Like
city.
aesthetics and wanting,
Right.
yeah.
It would look better than the shiny metal.
Right. In some instances, yeah.
In some instances, yes.
So we could change that if,
You could.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe some of that corrugated metal never rusts.
Galvanized.
Yeah, where others will rust, and if we were going to go down that avenue, I think we would have to really be specific on if that was another, option to have or to change in there, to be specific on.
I'll use as an example the rickety cricket building material that he used on the outside. It is rusting, and I personally like that look as opposed to spray painted or painted metal. I would much rather have a finish of some sort besides paint.
It's not on his fencing though, that's on his building itself. It's part
But
of
the
it.
material's the same. It is on a building, yes.
I would agree, though. I think the application on it's important because I think that they would, on that specific establishment and business that's intended to look that way on purpose that way, and it does, but I'm not, and I think where Lori has commented, for a fencing application, I don't think you're necessarily, I think it's more in line, you're not looking for that type of look, aesthetics.
For discussion?
Thank you, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't mind. I think, Gary, you initiated this comment when you were sitting over there on the far side regarding review. But I think appreciate the research that Sylvia's done for it. It seems like from our surrounding communities, surrounding ones where Sylvia was able to pull research, the fabric is not used in the surrounding communities. And I think the direction of option number 3 on there would probably be where I would be landing, because I don't think the fabric, nor to be quite honest with you, I would probably expand that, open for discussion, but I would expand that and include the vinyl coated polyester as well as the landscape fabric. Just strike the whole thing, because I'm not sure with the prevailing winds and the amount of days that it's windy out here, even that it's still a tarping type material that's not going to have the core strength to hold up to it from a maintenance perspective. And from a personal experience standpoint, we just swapped over and out in Peach Springs at the plant, we just changed over our cold storage areas from a fabric-like material that we've used for years to a slatted one. And we're not out there trying to please anyone from an aesthetic standpoint, but it was just from a maintenance standpoint. I was tired of replacing the fabric all the time, and the slatting's holding up pretty well to the environment. So I think that would be open for consideration for us, whether just from an owner maintenance standpoint, does it really make sense to still allow the polyester period? But
I agree. I agree. With our high winds and stuff, it just becomes tattered, and it doesn't look very appealing. It doesn't hold up, and I think it should be taken out. All of our surrounding communities here, including the county, they don't allow that, and they for that reason. For the aesthetics, it just does not hold up.
Sylvia, can I ask you a question? Is there an ordinance that if things aren't being maintained, are they notified that they have to fix it? I mean, like, even you take somebody did a block wall and only half stuccoed it, and it sat that way for 5 years. It's half one and half the other. Is there anything in our zoning that says, okay, it's time to get this one way or the other, fix it?
Commissioner, in the last sentence of the paragraph, there's actually a sentence that states, these materials must be maintained in working order and not allowed to deteriorate into an unsightly condition. So we could go out if somebody told us to go check on it.
So
and
it's
say,
basically if somebody complains,
Yes,
then
it
we're
would
going
be
to take action,
complaint-driven,
but not,
yes.
okay, all right, thank you, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
so I think that takes back to the discussions we've had before about enforcement. But I think the coding is written properly for it. It becomes an enforcement question at that point.
Is this open for discussion for the public, since, any comments? Richard?
You can invite the public to.
Is there any comments from the public on this matter? Ma'am, could you please step up and present your name and rank and serial number? And
Certainly. I'm Suri Tabbert. I live downtown. I'm a resident of Kingman, obviously. And I just wanted to mention that landscaping fabric is something that you've been talking about here tonight. But my friend who owns acreage in another city has been using shade screen as additional screening for her neighbors, and it has held up really well for about 5 years. In 5 years' time, it looks basically like old shade screening. It doesn't really tear. It is penetrable from the wind, and it's definitely a low-cost solution for some people. So I just want to make sure that everything's considered and these less costly remedies are found. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Open up discussion amongst us.
If we miss something like the shade screening material, Sylvia, if we miss something like that and it's not actually specifically listed, would they have to come to planning and zoning for a permit or a request for that type of material?
We wouldn't allow for something other than what's allowed.
What's on the list?
Yes.
Okay.
And at this point, we're really talking about open storage versus residences.
Right, right.
So there's a little difference with that.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Well, welcome.
I don't know that it's too much to expect people to just strike out that whole last sentence and get rid of, you know, all of the landscape and the polyester PVC. I mean, because it is for commercial. And I think it would hold up so much better. And even before it didn't hold up, it doesn't look that good.
I agree.
That's true.
That's true. I'm going to make a motion that we remove the polyester and the landscaping fabric from draft text. You need to draft a text.
Richard, do we, well, I guess we want to draft a text amendment or make a change on Sylvia, on the text amendment. So do we need to make a motion for that, or?
Yes. The commission can make a motion for staff to draft a text amendment to section 26.810 of the zoning ordinance to remove what you'd like to remove. And then I'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
So we want to remove the whole opacity rating of
Yes.
75% and
Yes.
landscaping fabric.
Correct. That's what I'm making a motion for her to do.
So we want to make a motion as what?
To draft the text to remove the landscaping material and the yeah, I can't even say that word. From our, so you're removing that whole section 3 out of there.
Do I have a
From
second?
section
I'll second it.
26810 of the zoning ordinance.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Sylvia, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did we get that clear for you, Sylvia?
I think so.
Sorry, Sylvia.
I'll read
Apologize.
those minutes again.
Yeah, Sandy will straighten this out.
All righty, then, B, discussion regarding tiny homes. The commission will discuss the subject of tiny homes, including what zoning districts such homes are currently permitted or may be permitted in the City of Kingman zoning ordinance. The commission may initiate a text amendment to make certain changes to the zoning ordinance. Again, Sylvia?
Yes. Okay, so I did step a little back since we have new commissioners on board, and so a little bit will be repeat, a little bit will be new. Who would start this? Okay, so tiny homes has been a topic for discussion in the planning and zoning and building community over the past several years. Several people have contacted planning and zoning wanting to know where tiny homes are allowed to be constructed within city limits. At the present time, the city has 2 zoning districts that allow for tiny homes, rural residential and residential manufactured home. Both the Planning and Zoning Division and the Building and Life Safety Division would like to get ahead of the tiny home movement here in Kingman, Arizona. So today's discussion is to inform the public about what tiny homes are and where tiny homes are allowed. What are tiny houses? The typical American home is around 2,600 square feet, whereas the typical small or tiny house is between 100 and 400 square feet. Tiny homes come in all shapes, sizes, and forms, but they enable simpler living in a smaller, more efficient space. And here's some examples of various tiny homes that I found online. They can be very unique and different. So currently, tiny homes are allowed in the following zoning districts: RMH, RR, These zoning districts do not have a minimum floor area size required for single-family detached dwellings. Other zoning districts have a minimum of 860 square feet minimum floor area for single-family detached dwellings built after 1945. So in this map, I highlighted the RMH zones. They're mainly in blue, and rural residential that have /tan area. So here's rural residential, and here's some RMH zones here, and there's a lot on the other side of the tracks, and behind the hospital, there's some area of RMH. And here's a closer look at the area behind the hospital that tiny homes could be allowed in, right here, RMH. Another area could be on the other side of the tracks, kind of like I mentioned, but I zoomed in so you could see how much RMH is over in that area. Tiny homes can be constructed out of cargo containers, and the reason I bring this up, because typically when we talk about tiny homes, that's kind of the first thing I hear is about cargo containers. So they're made out of a lot of materials, and they can be made out of cargo containers as long as it's engineered and meets the building code. Tiny homes placed in this zoning district do need to be affixed to the land on a permanent foundation. The tiny homes on wheels would not be allowed to be placed on these lots in the zoning districts because we view them as recreation vehicles, since they are licensed by the Motor Vehicles Department. Tiny homes on wheels would be allowed in RV parks in the RMH zoning district. Here's the difference between homes on foundation, and here's some on wheels. In the RMH zoning districts, a large portion of the subdivision lots were recorded in the early 1900s as 25-foot by 100-foot lots. Currently, the ordinance requires lots recorded prior to 1945 that mainly consist of the 25 by 100 or 50 by 100 to have a minimum building site of 5,000 square feet. But planning has been asked if the city would allow tiny homes to be built on lots which are 25 by 100 feet in size. Planning and zoning doesn't object to amending the RMH zoning district to allow for tiny homes to be built on 2,500 square foot lots as long as they can have water and sewer. There is some sewer service available to lots in RMH zoning districts, as seen in the maps that I will show you. Currently, sewer is required for new construction of homes located within 250 square feet of sewer service, and if new construction is not within 250 square feet of sewer service, septic is allowed, but for lots large enough to support the individual septic units. So again, planning and zoning doesn't object to amending the RMH zoning district to allow for tiny homes to be built in 2,500 square foot lots as long as there's water and sewer service available. So this kind of gives you an idea of all the older lot sizes. This is behind the hospital, how they were platted. And this is a map showing where the sewer lines are currently now. And then here is another early map of across the tracks, the Hubs edition that shows a lot of the small lots that were platted early on. And here's some sewer service showing what's available to many of the lots down there. On research, I conducted how other cities in the area, such as Lake Havasu, Bullhead, and Mojave County, currently process tiny home proposals. And the city of Bullhead has a minimum floor area requirement of 672 square feet of living area allowed for single-family residences and would have to amend their code to allow for tiny homes. City of Lake Havasu would require tiny homes to meet the 2012 residential building code and has no minimum floor area required in single-family zoning districts. Mojave County does not have a minimum floor area required, and tiny home proposals have to meet the building code. For today, I wanted to provide you information as to where tiny homes are currently allowed. Staff does recommend amending the RMH section of the zoning ordinance to allow for tiny homes to be built on 25 by 100 lots as long as there's water and sewer available. If desired, we can revisit the possibility of expanding other zones such as the multifamily zoning districts to allow for tiny homes at the next meeting. The Kingman Fire Department Building and Life Safety Division is in support of amending the zoning ordinance. And for commission action, you can ask staff to bring back more research before initiating a public hearing or take no further action, or make a motion for staff to draft a text amendment to section 4 of the zoning ordinance for RMH zoning district to allow tiny homes on 25 by 100 as long as there's sewer and water available. Do you have questions for me on this item?
I do.
Sure.
Does the city of Kingman, does it have a minimum square footage for tiny homes at this time?
Well, no, on the RMH zone and RR, we don't have a minimum living area. But you said square foot for
Yeah,
lots?
total square foot.
It would be based on the current zoning allowance, and like in the RMH zone, it could be, it was normally 6,000 square feet, right? Okay, sometimes I gotta double check myself, but because of the older lots, it's actually 5,000 square feet with the 25 by 100s or 50 by 100s. It has to be, combined lots. So that's where we were asked if people can build tiny homes on the smaller lots recorded earlier on, and that would have to be amended if that's the case.
Okay, and that would be considered non-conforming lots, right? If it's 25 by 100
If
at
we,
this time?
Currently, yes, because we combine them, but if we amend the text to allow it by 25 by 100, then it would be a different situation. We'll be allowing the 25 by 100 lots. Currently, yes. Currently, because we combined, it would be 5,000 versus 6,000 square feet.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, would we want to put a minimum square foot? Would it behoove us to look at a minimum for a tiny home?
Yeah, that's something we can do. The smallest ones I know are 25 by 100. Is that correct?
That's
Like
the lot you're talking about.
You're talking about the-
smallest, the oldest recorded.
You're talking about the lot, he's talking about the actual building.
The
so-
building, okay,
tiny
I'm
home.
starting to get confused now, so I apologize. You could do that.
I gotta be honest with you. I think tiny homes, and then the next thing that pops into my head is, can we get an addition on our tiny home? And how many outbuildings can I put out for storage because I don't have any place to store my stuff? So are we getting into we're treading into territory where we're gonna create a bigger problem than creating a solution here? So I think we need to take those types of things into consideration too when we're discussing how we're going to allow for this. I'm not opposed to it. What I am concerned about is 5 years down the road after it's built and Jane gets married to Jim and they have a kid and they can't afford to move out of their tiny home, but now we have to figure out what we're gonna do.
And to clarify, this is where they're allowed now, in RMH and RR as of today. So they could build it today. And-
Right.
Okay, just to clarify it. The only thing that we don't have right now is the allowance for 25 by 100, to build on a 25 by 100 size lot.
They would still have to fall under the guidelines of the setback requirements for the tiny home. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
So right now, most areas, 5 feet from the side, and I'm assuming,
20 in the front, 15 in the rear typically, yes.
so they'd have to follow those guidelines, so then they're even getting limited to,
Yes.
for downtown.
And there would not be any exterior appearance criteria, is that correct?
That's correct.
So they could,
These
cardboard box and there you go.
Yeah.
So we could make a text amendment for the tiny homes if they build this tiny home on this non-conforming lot and say down the road that they want to do any kind of additions or anything like that. Could we put like a stipulation in there that they could not increase the square footage on the 25 by 100 square foot lot?
I believe we have a maximum coverage of the lot we could use. You can help me
Isn't it
with this
50%?
sometimes, because we already have a maximum coverage right now, the way it sits, and then, I would need to do a little calculation, but it would apply to the 25 by 100 also, of the maximum coverage of that lot. I would have to do a little calculation.
Seems like it's
Yeah,
60%.
60%, yeah.
So they can add 60%?
They can cover the lot up to 60%.
Correct.
Of that, whatever the lot size is.
Does that include outbuildings?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but they could also build up.
Yeah, they can build up.
235.
In the case of cargo containers, for example, which I think that's a great idea. They can be stacked
Not
with,
according to ordinance.
If they're engineered.
as long as they meet codes,
Yes.
they can be stacked. And you could realistically build out of cargo containers 1,000 square foot on a 25-foot lot. Realistically, because of the stackability. Yes? No?
Yeah, you could. You're kind of going into building territory almost pretty soon, so I might need your help, Keith. Yeah, so, but sounds like we could.
Good evening, Commission Chair and Commission members. For those that you don't know me, I'm Keith Eaton. I'm the fire official and right now the building official as well for the city of Kingman. A little bit of background, and I spoke to this before. Sylvia and I have kind of been going back and forth with this for about a year. This is one of those things that we kind of felt in the prior building official that we kind of just wanted to get in front of. We're starting to get some interest downtown, moving smaller houses or doing some different things. In answer to a couple questions of Commissioner McCoy, so as far as moving a box in and calling it the house,
Well,
we can't. So just to clarify, and I understand you were saying that, but to clarify that these will have to meet the 2012 or whatever our current code, International Residential Code. So these tiny homes are built like a home. They have all the same rules, egress, all the same things. There are some things that we have to take into account when we do a smaller home with a smaller footprint like that. But the good thing about it, since we've been researching this, there's almost every county, at least in northern Arizona and a lot of Arizona, have already moved forward with these. Building departments have made their adjustments, so we have a lot to go on as far as research, and we have done that, of the things that we will have to make possible concessions on or changes in the building code. As far as the answer with cargo containers, that's where it kind of all started with cargo containers, and I've always heard that you can use them for a home if they're engineered. Well, I've never found anybody that engineers them. Obviously, they stack them 10 high on a ship, but they're stacked with certain points that stack on top of each other. Where if it was engineered to walk on the ceiling, walk on the roof or whatever, it has to be definitely engineered. We have our first engineering coming in soon. There is engineers out there that do the engineering on those. So in essence, building code-wise, building on the percentage of lot that you would have, you could go up, then you would meet, then you would have to go against the height restrictions that are allowed within the city's zoning that you would have there too. And then again, on the smaller lots, you would still have to contend with they have to be sewer and water, just simply because there's no room to put a septic on. And that's kind of why we looked at those. So that limits a little bit more, and I think Sylvia has, I think you pointed out some of the areas that limits us, that have sewer and water to put on those. There are several lots downtown, not as many as what we had originally thought before we started, with the research on it, that the 25-foot lots. But just rest assured, these do have to be built like a home. They're not just brought in or anything. And I think the big push for these around different communities is they're not just simply a manufactured house or a mobile home. Mobile homes are still allowed after a certain year in the city. It's just different. They look different. So this is one of those things that we've worked quite a bit on, and I addressed this last time that when we spoke. This is just one of those things that we can get ahead of and be proactive at something that we may not have more than a couple a year. We may not have any applications come through when we allow it, but we give the citizens the opportunity to do this if this is what they want to do. Sometimes we get a little tired of being reactive all the time to complaints or whatever, so when we can do something proactive, we always look forward to it. So, is there any other questions?
I have a question. If they were to put a container and have it engineered to fit code to build a house, is the fire department prepared to be able to get in and out of those if there is a fire? Do you have the tools that you need to access those houses?
Well, they're actually, when they're built by the international code, it still has the same egress, same ingress. So it still have regular walk-in doors, and they still have windows that exit that still have to be 42 inches off the floor to egress. So we would, actually, the only thing that really changes is the siding on it. So we still have, accessible areas to get into it.
Are you looking at more intense heat with the steel?
Well, you could, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so a
yeah.
safety issue for your firefighters?
Not necessarily any more than just a super well insulated house. I mean, they could, but we still, again, we still require them to have the egress and ingress to get out. But as far as the steel siding,
what I'm saying is if there's no place for that fire to go, are you creating a backdraft if there's a problem?
well, it creates some other challenges, but it's
And is the
really,
fire department prepared to
we
handle?
are, yeah. It's not a great deal of challenge. One, the size of the building itself.
Okay.
If we were talking about a commercial steel building that's 10,000 square foot or better, that would be different. We're talking about a 200 square foot that still has, we would still access it the same. Hopefully people get out quicker, but really it's no different than a regular residence, with that.
Except
But-
for the roof, the ceiling of those sea containers, they're still metal, so you have no place for anyone to get up there and to vent it.
Well, we would vent it, that
Yeah,
way, but.
you have
but
the technology.
But again, ventilation on a 400 square foot, I do understand, and it is, it creates, I guess for lack of a better term, like a sauna effect. I mean, but they are allowed, and we are using them, we are seeing them around. Is there anything else? All right, thank you.
Any more questions for Sylvia?
Sylvia, I want to thank you for your time in researching this.
You're welcome.
Ask you one more question.
Sure.
Can you just do a little bit more follow-up on what some of the more rural areas? I know you did Bullhead Lake Havasu, but I know Flagstaff is allowing a few of them now. And just curious of what like Pima County is doing or Coconino County is doing, something in our area. Population size too, just to,
I can do that.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. To clarify, Commissioner DeVries, Pima, Flagstaff, and there was one more you mentioned?
Coconino.
Coconino? Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Sylvia.
thank you.
I want to open it to the public. Mark Sipple, could you please step up and say your name and
Mark Sipple. I'm the lawyer up the hill with the marquee sign that says Wisecrack Sayings. If you drive on Beale Street, you'll see me. In 2015, I came before the city council and presented an idea that came out of a case where a gentleman tried to buy a small 25-foot lot piece of parcel, and the building department of the previous generation, before our current one, just flat out denied any kind of remodeling, fixing, repair, or whatever. And it was right here at 3rd Street in Spring. And the whole hot concept of small lot zoning development, just ran into a brick wall. To hear it come up today, I was just given notice, and I apologize for not being more prepared or more information, but I would ask that you ask for more research on this, because it's not just the tiny house issue. We've got houses downtown right now that are in decrepit, fallen down, that cannot be remodeled, cannot be fixed. They just are falling down until they either burn or someone pays to deconstruct them and remove them. There are lots of empty lots that are in the same condition that have water, that have sewer. There are lots that have been partially built out. In the particular case that I was on, the assessor's office wanted to divide and separate out parcels, but the people had built on them in such an interestingly weird way that all of the parcels were below 5,000 feet. And so they were all non-conforming uses. I think this is a great opportunity for this commission to be leading with, and I apologize that I didn't know of who you were or where you were to deal with this and bring up. But in the major cities, downtown areas, they're building on 25 by 100-foot lots, and they're building apartment complexes within that with plenty of parking, plenty of space. And so there's a huge possibility of helping revitalize what downtown is right now and allowing property owners to maximize the use of their property, to bring back some of the people that have left our community, and add to that the tiny house phenomenon that has sprung up. But I would ask that the Planning and Zoning Commission broaden its vision a little on this in terms of just looking at some of the existing properties right now that could be rehabbed, refurbed, and not have to worry about so much the tiny house and that limitation, but allow homeowners that broader limitation to do with their property as they would choose.
Any questions?
You happen to know what the zoning districts are in the case that you were talking about
Oh,
specifically?
they were all right down here at Third and Spring. There's two 25-foot lots, then there's a third lot that was partially built on that one of the county attorneys actually bought and then substantially remodeled and upgraded the property tremendously. And then behind that, there was a couple of more properties, and we ended up in some very serious title company litigation, and it got more expensive than the properties themselves were worth. So I don't really know what that zoning district was.
Can you tell us? Third and Spring off the top of your head is?
Third and Spring.
I believe it's part 2.
As I say, I didn't have enough time to prepare any presentation to come to you and say, hey, there's some additional materials to do. I know Mr. Cooper was extensively involved in the litigation, so he's a resource that he would know quite a bit about this particular case and that whole concept. And this was a passion of mine a number of years ago that fell to the wayside due to a very busy law practice. And so I'm excited to hear somebody else. Okay. So that would be my request, that we get more study on this to make it a little bit bigger picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Joni Miller?
Good evening, Council. Thank you. My name is Joni Millen, and I am a resident of here in Kingman, Arizona, and that's fine because it's an easy mistake, so not a problem. Very happy to see the small lot come back to the surface a little bit. I'm actually in support with the Kingman Downtown Merchants Association. I'm one of the communications people for that department or association. We brought this to light several years ago. And it is an issue. A lot of properties have been condemned, abated, and removed. And so now those lots, we can't do anything, so what do they end up? They end up a weed trap, and nobody taking care of it. So this is really very wide. It's not just in downtown, however. These lot sizes are all over Kingman. So if you're looking at doing something like this, I would suggest rather than the sections that you have approved already, do it towards an actual lot size and see if we can't get Kingman infilled in many different ways. A little over a year ago, we brought forth a proposal with a PowerPoint to put forth a downtown development district, because there are also commercial lots. There are also undersized that we cannot build on. So we have an actual PowerPoint presentation that we would like to pull forth. I just learned of this meeting this evening yesterday, so I haven't been able to prepare a whole lot. I did send the email and a copy of that PowerPoint to Mr. Gary Kellogg and our interim city manager as well. They have them. I'm welcome to share it with you again so that you can look at it. But it's what the downtown merchants put together so that we're a piece and part and a say in what's happening in downtown as well. So kudos for all of that. I think I've done pretty much what I need to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Johnny. Would Siri Tabbert, did I pronounce that right?
Pretty close. name's Siri Tabbert. I have this map here that I wanted to show you. I have it at home. It shows historically how, this is the original plat of downtown Kingman. And again, Joni's right, it's all over town, these 25-foot lots. But you can see the 16 lots that this complex and fire station, Benelli House stand on now. Those are the larger lots on the top. Below, you see the multitude of 25-foot lots, 25-foot wide by 100. Many of the parcels today are still given that same legal description. So they've been passed down through families. Just wanted to let you know that residents downtown are very aware of this issue and are very proud of their history. But the tiny house movement and the small lot rebuild is really an issue about the present. In the past, people have taken into consideration that smaller homes represent a smaller investment, maybe less money to maintain and create a nice neighborhood. But like Sylvia's PowerPoint said, the average house today is 2,600 square feet. This is not the future. This is not the way that things are going. And I believe we need to look at innovation and preserve our downtown as well as revitalizing, allowing free choice and creativity for our downtown residents and commercial people, and that this sort of project represents the future and revitalization of downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Open it up for discussion amongst us.
I don't have any questions, but I absolutely agree with what they said, that the current proposal doesn't do enough. I think it needs to be opened up to more areas of downtown, and it will, I believe, create more infill and maybe make Kingman kind of a destination for, because we're being forward-thinking, and maybe build a little community of tiny houses downtown, who knows? But this, as proposed, doesn't go far enough.
Sylvia, can I have you do one more thing?
Yes.
Can you get us some information on how many undersized lots there are in our downtown district? How many there are
Like the
currently?
various sizes?
Yeah, so that we have a kind of a count of how many lots we're talking about and their locations within the downtown district.
Okay.
Does that make sense, what I'm
Yes.
asking for? Okay.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of tough. I did a couple comments. I was surprised by Sylvia's research that Bullhead was no and Havasu was yes. I would have flopped that in my head in a heartbeat, the exact opposite way around. But hey, you know, shows what not to judge a book by its cover. I think my wife watches all those shows on Home Garden Network and Lifetime where they do these tiny house things. She's always fascinated by them on the way there, and the ones on the TV always turn out to be beautiful, like all those are up there as well. So I'm torn. Certainly, I think it's, I like the comment about free choice and creativity. On one hand, I think, yeah, that's cool and nice and something to consider, but then I also think about the community feel too. I mean, certain areas you want a feel or I don't know, a setup, a layout for the area, and I'm trying to picture some of these next to where you end up all checkerboarded with different looks. So I'm kind of torn on how to do that in a better manner so it's structured. And you maybe, I mean, your comment on an area of the, yeah, I could see that, where you had that was the type, I've seen some nostalgic things people have done before in a particular area. And it's turned out really nice, but it was planned that way. That was said, this is what we want to do in that area. I'm struggling with the mixed use concept, I guess, if that's probably a terrible way to say it, but
Are they going to become a bunch of rental properties?
yeah,
Maintenance?
then part of me thinks on the whole CUP process, well, maybe you'd feel more comfortable if there was a CUP process for it, so you saw a couple come through, and then you'd know, okay, that's the direction it's going, and I could see how that could make sense, but other people feel like that process then is stifling to the individual aspect, so it's kind of a balance between the two of them. But I guess I would probably land on I would like more public comment on it as well. I certainly appreciate everybody who spoke tonight on the subject. That's very helpful, all the comments there. But I almost have this feeling like in the areas you showed on the map where it's allowed, I could think rural, certainly rural. I mean, you're out there rural, kind of freedom of choice, do what you want, but I don't think necessarily our map in every case, what's mapped as rural really has the rural type wild desert type feel. It's more a structured type rural. And then in those scenarios, I'm not so sure that you would want that, or you'd want something a little more structured around it. So I'd be curious to get more community area. I mean, if you had the map up that shows areas that are allowed, not that you have to pull up something, but I'm just saying for public comment standpoint,
Next time, yeah.
if from, you got to the public, these are the areas where this type of development could occur, and you structured we had a public hearing or a public comment period around that. How do people feel that live in those particular areas? Certainly got some good feedback tonight from some people that live in areas that would be in favor of it that way. So you want to, I'd feel better, I think, if we had more input that way in other areas where it would be allowed, and it give us more direction. And hey, this is something that people want.
I agree.
Because that's the people you want to hear from, people that are going to be living in the areas where that type of building structure would be allowed, as long as they're comfortable with it.
It's becoming very popular in county, the more rural areas, but they're larger lots. Because in the county, it doesn't have, the sewer and the water doesn't have all of the facilities.
And I think fully
So, but there is, been seeing a whole lot of permits coming in with the smaller houses, on big lots. But then they go and then they do like an accessory structure, then they'll add another one. And I've seen that like 4 or 5 different times, but they have the property and the means to take care of it, and I would be a little bit concerned with the small homes. Now, if they were, and you did say that it is a requirement for them to be on sewer and water. I think that we should stick with that and not have them in a rural area on a small lot where they have to have like their own water treatment facility.
Correct. Chairman, Commissioners, another thing we can do, if you're concerned about the appearance, we could amend Section 26 of the development criteria to include the zones like RMH and RR they don't fall under now, to meet the development's criteria for homes built from this point on, if that's a concern as well. So there's more things we can look at.
And I think as you do the research in the other areas, you might find what their criteria are and bring them.
Correct, yeah.
The way it's standing now, the way Mark explained, there's a lot of empty lots in downtown. Can someone right now come in and purchase 2 lots side by side and then put in for the variance to make it 1 lot?
They could use 2 lots to make it a buildable, like 5,000 square foot lot. They could do that. And I'm sure I'm going to talk with Mr. Sippel a little more about the situation there. Most of the downtown areas are 2, so that's not a zoning we have discussed yet. So that's something I will bring back to you as well, so that we can discuss that further. Otherwise, some of the homes that were maybe abated at that point, they were probably already it couldn't repair those, basically, so they were abated by the building department. But I was going somewhere with that thought. Oh, it was the non-conforming. It was the non-conforming. We actually do have a non-conforming section, as we visited about a month ago or so, that we do have allowances for some of these homes to repair.
I was thinking that same thing.
Yes. So I will do more research though on that and bring it back to you.
Thank you, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we table this until we get more information from Sylvia.
I'm going to second that.
You guys all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. All right, new business. 6A, conditional use permit case CUP 18-0001. A request from Linda Lowe and Edward Dunham, applicants, and Craig Leonard, trustee, property owner, for a conditional use permit for mini storages. The subject site is Zone C3, Commercial Service Businesses, and located on the northwest side of East Andy Devine Avenue, southwest of Horizon Boulevard. The property is 3.57 acres and is described as parcels 1B, 1C, and 1D of Block 2, Shangri-La Estates, second amended, Section 5, T.21 North, R.16 West of the GNSRM, Mojave County, Arizona. Richard?
Good evening, and Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is a conditional use permit case to allow mini storages on a series of lots on Andy Devine near Horizon Boulevard. Property owner is Leonard Craig. The applicants are Linda Lowe and Edward Dunham. And again, it's a conditional use permit request for mini storages in the C3 zoning district. Property is located on the northwest side of Andy Devine Avenue, southwest of Horizon Boulevard. Property is approximately 3.57 acres. It's currently zoned C3 and is vacant. The general plan designation is community commercial. Physical characteristics is generally a flat lot. There's a site slope to the north. It's not within the flood zone. There is water and sewer to the property. On the north side, it stops at the Dollar General. There'll be the need for extending the water and sewer line to serve the property at the time of development. Property is adjacent to East Andy Devine, which is also Highway 66. It's a divided state highway with a median. There's a concrete pathway along the road edge. There's no driveway to the site at this time. So this is a map showing the subject property in the red box here. We also have Dollar General, the northeast. Mojave County Public Works yard is up in here. City's Public Works yard is to the east, the MVD and the EDOT yard to the southeast. And then we have a commercial fueling facility and gas station and convenience store, which are currently closed, to the southwest of the property. This is showing the surrounding zoning. It's all C3 immediately surrounding the property. We posted the site with a zoning notice on January 25th. We published a notice in the newspaper on the 28th of January and sent out notices to all the surrounding property owners within 150 feet as required. We didn't receive any comments from the public. This is just showing the site itself. Engineering department had no comments on the CUP. They did say that they would have comments at the time of development. At the building permit submittal at time of the submittal. The water and sewer extensions will be required, as I mentioned earlier, across the property frontage, and a grading and drainage plan will be required. The city surveyor commented that the 3 parcels that are involved in this property were created by deed without going through our minor lot split process, which is to create a parcel plat, so that those parcels should be combined. There were no objections from the city fire department, flood control, or Sudden Link. ADOT did comment on it because it, again, is ADOT right-of-way. They said that they would likely require the construction of right-turn deceleration lane to the driveway to the site, and possibly require the extension of a left-turn deceleration lane, which is in the median of the highway currently. Also requirement for a grading drainage plan and provide detailed site plan for the access and also the for fencing and landscaping of the site. So again, the applicant is proposing to place mini storage units constructed of, again, Conex storage containers. It's pretty popular these days. On 2 parcels, parcels 1C and 1D. Those are the southerly of the 2 parcels on the site. And use parcel 1B closest to Dollar General for open storage of RVs and boats. Also, there will be an office on the site. Conceptual site plan, which I'll show you in 1 second, shows 92 containers that would be 8 by 40 and 14 containers that would be 8 by 20. The total area of all the units combined would be 31,680 square feet. The 8 by 40 containers will be segregated into 2 to 4 units, and the 8 by 20 containers will have 2 units. Each unit will have a 7-foot tall roll-up door. The mini storage areas will be accessed by a paved drive aisle, approximately 26 feet in width. Storage containers may be repurposed and in use in any zone district, provided it is done in accordance with the adopted building code, 2012, in this case 2012 IBC. So this is the conceptual site plan of the site. This area here is where the mini storages would be located. Again, the parcels 1B and 1C. This area just south of the Dollar General will be used for open storage of RVs and boats. Access to the site would be approximately right here where the driveway would be across from a highway crossover that currently exists on the highway. Under our CUP regulations, we are required to make certain findings, and so that's what this section is about. Applicable regulations, again, the property is designated as community commercial under the general plan 2030. Property is zoned C3, and mini storages are permitted by conditional use permit in C3. Properties appear to meet the size and dimensional standards of the C3 district. However, as pointed out by the city surveyor, the parcels were created by deed at some point in the past without going through the parcel plat process. So we're recommending that those parcels be combined, and that if future splits are desired, that they would follow that adopted minor lot split process. The use of mini storages on site would not appear to have a negative impact on the character of the area, should not have an adverse impact to neighboring properties. Property would be, again, accessed from any divine. It corresponds with an existing highway crossover. This photo shows the crossover here. The property's standing basically on the property, and the crossover's over here. So the driveway will extend about 45 feet into the site with a mechanical gate to allow that would allow queuing for about 2 vehicles on the property, so they wouldn't be queued into traffic at all. The Institute of Transportation Engineers estimates about 79 vehicle trips per day would be generated by this use at full build out on a weekday. As I mentioned, driveway and roadway improvements will be subject to ADOT's review and permitting process, as this is a state highway. There is an existing landscape pathway that is maintained by ADOT in the right-of-way. However, Section 10 of our zoning ordinance will require additional landscaping on the site at the time of development. A landscaping plan will be required and will be reviewed in further detail at the building permit stage. Fencing also is proposed to be located across the property frontage near the entrance. In accordance with subsection 26.810 with outside storage, where outside storage is allowed, those areas will have to be screened from the neighboring properties and streets with a fence or wall 8 feet in height. We already talked about the allowable materials that we require for outside storage that would have to be used in this case. Staff, however, in this case would recommend either masonry or chain link with double slats would be the preference for screening. In terms of nuisance, it doesn't appear that the proposed use will create a flood or fire hazard, nor will it be a nuisance to other surrounding property owners in terms of noise, odor, dust, or vibration or illumination. So the staff recommendation is for approval of the CUP as requested under CUP 18-001 with the following conditions. Parcels 1B, 1C, and 1D of Block 2 Shangri-La Estates shall be combined into a single parcel, and future lot splits will need to follow the minor lot split ordinance as stated in Section 2-146 of the Kingman Municipal Code. 2, driveway access and roadway improvements will be subject to ADOT's review and permitting process. And 3, open storage areas on parcel 1B shall be screened from neighboring properties and streets in accordance with Section 26.810 of the Kingman zoning ordinance And we are recommending, again, the allowable fencing material be limited to either masonry or chain link fencing with slats. So with that, I'll try answer any questions you may have. And the applicants are also here this evening.
Any questions? I guess not. Thank you,
Okay,
Richard.
I'll put up the site plan again. Thanks.
Would the applicant like to please speak? How are you doing?
My name's Jed Noble. I'm the engineer. I prepared the site plan, so if you guys have any questions regarding the site plan or the use of the site, here.
I have one question. Being that you're using the cargo containers, and I know cargo containers come in every color, are you gonna be painting them all one color so everything matches, or what is your, on the process of those?
That's probably a question for.
Could you please step up, ma'am?
And you have some of those pictures. They're all brand-new cargo containers that are manufactured. This way, there's a company that makes them. And they're going to look just like storage units.
Oh.
See, kind of like, more like this, something, down those lines, but not blue. But they're not used containers. They're all made to be done this way. Some of them will be like the small units, and then some will be the bigger units, and they'll all just be together. And yeah, they're all going to be painted the same color, and they're going to look, they're brand new. They're not like used off a ship or something like that. They're prefab to, there's some others that kind of storage units. It's a new fad that's kind of coming out again, I guess, that they're doing all over the United States, and they're much faster to put together, and they just bring them all in and they're done. You don't make them on site.
That's interesting.
Legos for adults.
Yes.
And it'll all be paved and everything. It's going to be, we have to, whatever the city wants.
And it's all it's single level, right?
And the office is also going to be, like how you guys were talking about the tiny houses, the office is going to be made into like
It comes from a conic container, just kind of like an office, like you sometimes see the construction sites have those. It'll be permanent once it's there with bathrooms and everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Put it up for discussion.
Yeah, I didn't have any issue. I mean, I drive by there every day going back and forth to Peach. There's another, I think a couple properties up, there's another storage facility there. It's consistent with the area and the character. I think the comment Rich had on character, consistent, that's fine.
Yeah, and
I don't have any issues. Okay, I'll make a motion that we allow the CUP to proceed per staff's recommendations 1, 2, 3 as Rich detailed.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Commissioners' comments, limited to announcements, availability, attendance at conferences and seminars, requests for agenda items for future meetings, and requests for reports from staff. Richard, I have one that's kind of comes to mind, and I'm kind of thinking this might be maybe up Scott's Avenue too. I know obviously we have, I don't know, let's say, use the right word, plans or how downtown is supposed to be developed, what's allowed on Andy Devine and so forth. Can we have that for future discussion to review that and possibly go over?
Are you looking at like an overview of, say, the general plan and what the land use designations are in certain areas, or what specific plans?
Yeah, because, I see tire stores down there. There's businesses down there that maybe I don't know, in my mind, doesn't reflect upon the city and the downtown. And even I know you can't do nothing about it now, but maybe for future, something we could, you know, under the planning guidelines, I think,
Visit it.
revisit or look at it.
So it sounds like you're looking at the uses, what uses may be permitted in certain areas.
Yeah.
We could certainly help bring you a zoning map of the downtown area and then show you, you know, each district what's permitted in those areas.
To do with that one,
Can't, I bring around it.
Any other comments?
Just one quick, to Rich to clarify, so Sylvia's going to do additional research on the tiny house subject from other communities, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then I hate punting on issues and not addressing them, let them drag out, so that drives me nuts, so we have to do that. But if we get that additional research from Sylvia, I guess, Vicki, I'd have your comment. Do you think a public comment period on the subject would be warranted for people? I don't want to waste the public's time or anything, but I'd be looking for more input.
I do think it's the future. There's a lot of TV shows, right? But I do think it's the future. I think it would be a distinction for Kingman. I think it could be a good thing. And as Commissioner DeVries pointed out, I think that there could be lots and lots of issues and problems with it. So I think if you wanted to have a town hall discussion, just get the word out bigger that that's the topic, I think that'd be a good idea.
I agree.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping with that one.
I'd like to see that PowerPoint presentation that Joni
From downtown?
Millen alluded to. I'm sure she'd be happy to share that with us.
The downtown district.
Okay.
I think Marks too, I think they have Marks.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this a debate or anything, but I wonder if there's two separate subjects. There's a commercial subject and a residential subject. And I don't know whether you. Right.
It actually needs all to be inclusive. The overview does.
Yeah. So Sylvia, I know, just make sure, I'm sure the request right. I think we were thinking more residential. Potentially, Councilwoman DeVries was thinking more residential for asking for that research from Pima and Coconino. But if you're taking the time to do it, if people have separate commercial code around that particular subject from residential, and you find that in the research, I'd be interested to hear that as well. If it's separate, I'm not sure it is or not.
And if you haven't been to Container Park in Las Vegas, you should absolutely take the time and go see it.
Yeah, we had pictures.
It is an eye-opening experience.
Agree with you. Yeah. We have an motion for adjournment?
Sorry.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Very good.